Have you ever noticed the words you say to yourself before you write? Not the words that end up in the manuscript. I mean the words that happen around your writing. So the words you speak to yourself before you even open up your laptop. The words that run through your mind during a session when the scene feels messy. The words that you use afterwards when you decide whether what you did was enough. And maybe more importantly, the words that quietly shape the story you tell yourself about who you are as a writer. And my friend, those words matter because the words you speak to yourself are part of the writing process too. They're not separate from your creativity and they're not background noise. They shape how safe your nervous system feels, how much access you have to creative flow, how you interpret your progress, and how deeply you believe yourself to be the kind of writer who can finish. So today, we're talking about the magic of words, not in a fluffy way, in a very real, practical writer way. Because if your words can create entire worlds on the page, they can also shape the creative reality you are living inside. So stay with me for today's episode because this is going to shift how you speak to yourself as a writer. If you feel called to write a book, but writer's block, procrastination, and self-doubt keep pulling you from the page, you're not alone, and you're not meant to stay stuck. Hi, I'm Madison Michaels, author and life coach, and I've created this podcast as a creative space grounded in faith and mindset transformations to help you break through your blocks, gain creative clarity, and finally finish the book you're meant to write. So grab your cup of liquid gold and let's write the darn book together. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Write the Darn Book. I'm your host, Madison Michaels, and today we're diving into a Mindset Monday episode all about something that I think is so much more powerful than most writers realize. We're talking about the words you speak to yourself. Now, because we're writers, we already understand that words matter. We build entire worlds out of them. We create characters from nothing out of words. We make readers laugh and cry and ache and hope and then turn the page because of the words we choose and the meaning those words carry. But sometimes, and often, we forget that the same thing's happening inside us too. The words that you use about your writing, your manuscript, your creativity, and your abilities, even your progress as well. And these words that you tell yourself, they influence the kind of writer that you believe you are. Those words are shaping the emotional environment that you write from. And I want to say this really clearly right from the beginning. This isn't about policing every thought or pretending everything feels lovely when it really doesn't. That's not what we are doing here. This is about awareness. It's about noticing the language patterns that have quietly become part of your writing process and asking whether those words are helping us to become closer to the page or are they pushing us further away from it. Because some writers are trying to write inside an internal atmosphere that's full of criticism, pressure, panic, and judgment. Then they wonder why the words feel so heavy. Today, I really want to help you to look at the language around your writing with much more compassion and more power. I want to show you how your words can either tighten your body or soften it, how they can shut down the page or open it up to you, and how they can also reinforce an old identity that's not serving you, or how they can help you step into the writer that you are becoming. And by the end of this episode, I want you to have a simple way to shift the language you are using with yourself before, during, and after a writing session. Because your words are not just what you write. Your words are a part of how you write. Let's begin by talking about the words around the words, because I think this is the part that we often miss. When we talk about writing, we usually focus on the words that make it onto the page, the sentence, the paragraph, the scene, the chapter, the draft. But there are always words before those words. There are the words that you say to yourself when you think about your writing, the words you say when you imagine opening the manuscript, the words you use when someone asks, "How's your book going?" and the words you speak to yourself after a difficult writing session. And those words become the emotional doorway into your work. So if the sentence running through your mind before you write is perhaps, "I'm so behind," your body receives that as pressure. If the sentence is, "I always make this harder than it needs to be," your mind receives that as an identity. And if the sentence is, "This chapter is probably going to be awful," your creativity receives that as a judgment before it's even had a chance to breathe and move and expand on the page. And I want you to pause with that for a moment, because your relationship with your writing, it's already being shaped before you even type a single word. It begins in the way you approach the page. It begins in the story you tell yourself about what's about to happen, and it begins in the emotional meaning that you attach to the act of writing. And this is why two writers can sit down for the exact same 20-minute writing session and have completely different experiences. One writer opens the document and thinks, "I just need to find the next sentence." The other opens the document and thinks, "I'm failing at this, I can't do it." Same page, same amount of time, completely different internal realities. And that internal reality matters because your nervous system is listening all the time. Now, I really want to talk to you about this in terms of your words becoming instructions to you, and I want to do it in a grounded way, because when I say the magic of words, I don't mean that you can simply say a pretty sentence and suddenly a full manuscript appears. I wish that was the case. That would be so wonderful. I mean, could you imagine if you were just able to chant, "Finish draft, finish draft, finish draft" over and over in your mind, that the whole book would land on the page? I mean, that would be awesome, right? But it doesn't happen that way, does it? The magic of words is that language directs attention. It gives your brain a focus and it tells your nervous system what kind of experience you're having. It shapes the meaning of what's happening. If you say, "I'm stuck," and you repeat that on a loop, your mind starts organizing around being stuck. It looks for evidence of it. It notices what isn't moving. It reinforces the feeling that something's wrong and you are stuck. But if you say, "I'm finding my way into this scene," that gives your mind different instructions. It still honors the fact that the writing might feel unclear, but it also suggests movement. It suggests process, and it gives your creative mind somewhere to go. Do you feel the difference between those two? The "I'm stuck" feels like a wall. The "I'm finding my way in" feels like a doorway that you can step through. And that's the kind of shift that we're talking about today. Not fake positivity and not pretending that the writing feels easy. Because let's face it, sometimes it doesn't, yeah? But what we are doing is we are deliberately choosing language that gives your mind and your body a more useful direction and path. Because writers often use language that turns a moment into an identity. So a hard writing day becomes, "I'm terrible at this," or a messy draft becomes, "I can't write," or a week without progress becomes, "I never finish anything." But those are huge, big meanings to make from very human and natural moments. And the danger is that over time, those meanings can start to feel like who you are rather than something you are currently experiencing. A hard writing day is a hard writing day, but it's not a verdict on your writing talent. A messy draft is a messy draft, but it's not proof that your book is broken. And a slow week is just a slow week. It is certainly not evidence that you're the kind of writer who can never finish. And when you begin to separate the moment from the identity, you can start to reclaim your power as a writer. There are a few language patterns that I hear from writers all the time, and I've used plenty of them myself, trust me on that. Now, the first is pressure language. This is the language of should, have to, need to, and I must. Now, of course, we have deadlines. They are real commitments, and there are moments when the writing genuinely does need to happen. But when your entire relationship with the book is built around pressure, the page starts to feel like a place where you are being judged. You start sitting down and you think, I should have written more by now. And suddenly the writing session becomes a test you're already failing before you've even begun. A gentler, much more useful version might be, this book matters to me and today I'm giving it my attention. That still has commitment in it and it still has responsibility, but it also has warmth as well. The second pattern is identity language, and this is when you turn behaviour into a fixed statement about who you are. It could be, I'm a procrastinator, I'm inconsistent, I'm not a real writer, or it could even be, I'm someone who starts things and never finishes. My friend, those sentences are so heavy, and the more you repeat them, the more familiar they feel. Then, because they feel familiar, they start to feel true. But a pattern is not a personality. A habit is not your destiny, and the season that you're going through with your writing is not your permanent identity. Instead of saying, I'm inconsistent, you might say, I'm learning what consistency looks like. Instead of saying, I never finish, you might say, this is the book that's teaching me how to finish. Can you hear how different that feels? Now, the third pattern is judgment language, and this is the language that attacks the work before it's even had time to become anything. This is rubbish. This scene is terrible. No one is going to want to read this, or I've ruined this whole book. Now, I understand this one deeply because we do need discernment as writers and we do need to revise. We have to be honest when something isn't working. But discernment and judgment are not the same thing. Discernment says this scene needs a clearer emotional arc or shift, whereas judgment says this is awful and I'm an awful writer. Discernment gives you a next step. Judgment gives you a reason to close the laptop. When you notice yourself using judgment language, I want you to ask, is this helping me shape the work, or is this making me afraid of the work? Because there is a difference. Now, I want to talk about words and how they create writing states, because this is where we bring it back to the body for a moment. Words don't just live in your head, they create sensation. Think about the difference between these two sentences. So the first sentence, I have to write 2,000 words today or I'm falling behind, I'm failing. Compared to, my story matters, so today I'm going to open the document, start with the next scene, and keep moving. The two sentences create completely different states in the body. One might make your chest tighten or your shoulders lift, your breathing become shallow, whereas the other might give you a little more freedom, a little more room, a bit more steadiness, and a little more access to the words. And that matters because writing isn't just a thinking process. It's an embodied creative process. your brain, body, emotions, your imagination and memory and intuition, all of that, including your nervous system, are involved. So if the words you speak to yourself are constantly creating threat or pressure or shame, it makes sense that your creativity becomes harder to access. That doesn't mean you're fragile. It means you are human. And it also means that you can begin to create a different writing state by choosing different language at the threshold of the page. Before you write, you might say, I'm entering the world of the book now. Or it could be, I only need to write one sentence at a time. It could be, this draft is allowed to be shaped in stages. It doesn't have to be perfect straight away. Or it also could be, the words can come through me one word at a time. These aren't magic because they're pretty. They're magic because they change the state you write from. So let's make this practical. I really want to give you a simple 3-part reset that you can use when you notice your language turning against you and your writing. It's called the Magic Words Reset, and it has 3 steps. The first, notice the sentence. The second, soften the meaning. And the third, choose the next doorway. That's it. Notice the sentence, soften the meaning, choose the next doorway. And sometimes the next doorway is practical, sometimes it's emotional, and sometimes it's simply choosing a sentence that lets you see yourself as a writer again. So let's walk through it. First, notice the sentence. So this means that you need to pause long enough to hear what you're actually saying to yourself, not in a shaming type of way and not with frustration, just with curiosity. You might notice, oh, that sentence running through my mind is, I'm never going to get this right. And that awareness is powerful because you can't shift a sentence that you haven't become aware of or heard yet. Second, soften the meaning. And this is where you take the sting out of the sentence. You look for a truer, kinder, more useful version of it. So instead of, I'm never going to get this right, that could instead become, this part of the book needs more time and attention. Do you feel how much more workable that is? The first sentence collapses everything, but the second sentence gives you a place to begin. The third step, choose the next doorway. And this is where you bring the language back to action. Not a huge action and not an overwhelming plan, just the next doorway. The full reset might sound like this. The sentence I'm hearing is, I'm never going to get this right. A softer truth is, this part of the book needs more time and attention. My next doorway is to reread the last page and find one sentence I can build from. That's how you use words to move. Not to bypass the hard feeling and not to pretend that the writing is perfect, but to create enough safety and clarity and direction that you can take the next step. Let's try another one. The sentence might be, I'm so behind. The softer truth could be, I'm reconnecting with the book from where I am today. The next doorway might be, I'll open the manuscript for 10 minutes and make one clear note about what comes next. Or the sentence might be, this draft is a mess. The softer truth could be, this draft is raw material. The next doorway might be, I'll choose one scene and look for the emotional thread inside it. And again, notice what we're doing. We're not lying and we're not pretending. We're not saying everything is amazing when it feels so tangled and uncertain. We need to be truthful, but we need to use language to return ourselves to the work. Now, there's another piece of this that I really want to name because lots of writers focus on how they begin a writing session, but they forget about the way they end a writing session and how much that matters too. What do you say to yourself after you finish writing for the day? Because this is where a lot of writers accidentally train the writing process to feel unsafe. They write for 20 minutes, maybe they get a few hundred words down, maybe it's rough, maybe it's not quite what they hoped for. Then immediately they say, that wasn't enough, or that was terrible, or I should have done more. So the body receives the message, writing leads to criticism. And then the next day, when it's time to write again, some part of them resists. Of course it does. The last writing session ended with punishment. So I want you to become really intentional about the words you use at the end of a writing session. Even if the session was messy and even if you only wrote for a couple of minutes, perhaps even if all you did was to open the document and sit there reading the scene without actually typing a word, try ending with something that reinforces safety and identity. So you might say, I showed up for the book today, or this counts, or perhaps I'm building trust with myself. Or it could be the next piece is already beginning to reveal itself. That kind of language matters because it teaches your nervous system that writing is a place that you can return to safely. It teaches your creative mind that effort is going to be met with acknowledgement, not attack. And if you do this consistently, the page begins to feel different. Not overnight and not perfectly, but steadily. You begin creating a writing reality where showing up feels safer and where the draft has room to grow, where your writer identity is reinforced by the way you speak to yourself. So let's do a small exercise together now. Wherever you are, as long as it's safe to do so, take a gentle breath in. That's it. Now let it out slowly and just let your shoulders drop a little and relax. That's it. Just breathe in and breathe out and just relax. Now I want you to think about your current manuscript or the book idea that's been tugging at you. And I want you to just notice the first sentence your mind gives you about it. No judgment, just notice. Maybe it's encouraging. Maybe it's doubtful. Maybe it's tired or sharp. Or maybe it says, I'm excited. I can't wait to write this. Or maybe it says, I have no idea what I'm doing. Whatever it is, just hear it. Now ask yourself, when I speak that sentence to myself, does my body open towards the page or does it pull away from it? That one question is going to tell you so much. Now gently soften the sentence. Make it kinder. Make it more accurate and more useful. If the sentence was, I'm behind, soften it to, I'm returning to the book from here. If the sentence was, I don't know what I'm doing, soften it into, I can find the next small piece. And if the sentence was, this is too hard, soften it into, this part is asking for support and patience one step at a time. Now choose your next doorway. A doorway is small. It might be opening the document. It could be just reading the last paragraph or writing just one line of dialogue. Perhaps it's making a note. It could be setting a timer for 5 minutes. Perhaps playing the song that brings you back into the world of your book. Just one doorway. And now, quietly say to yourself, the words I speak to myself are part of my writing process too. Let that land because it's true. The deeper reason this matters is because every time you speak to yourself about your writing, you're also speaking to your writer identity. You are telling yourself who you are. And if the story you keep telling yourself is, I'm hopeless, I'm behind, I'm inconsistent, I never finish, then that becomes the identity your mind keeps rehearsing and returning to. But if you begin telling a more truthful and more supportive story, something begins to shift. I'm learning how I write best. I'm becoming someone who returns to the page. I can build trust with myself in small ways. The book is allowed to be written in stages. I am a vessel for this story, and the words can flow through me and onto the page. That's one I use so often for myself, and it's really an anchor for me. I have it up on my board, and whenever I am feeling blocked or I have self-doubt, I look at it and I read it to myself, and I remind myself I literally am a vessel for the story. I just have to let the words flow through me and onto the page. Because the way you speak to yourself isn't separate from the way you write. It's part of the environment that your creativity lives inside. And my friends, your creativity deserves an environment where it can breathe and be nurtured. And if today's episode has made you realize that the words you use with yourself are tied into bigger patterns, the way you respond to pressure, the way you move through resistance, perhaps the way your inner critic speaks, and the way your natural writing personality shows up at the page, then that is exactly the kind of work we look at inside a writing personality blueprint session. In my blueprint sessions, we look at how you're uniquely wired to write through your writing personality. We look at your creative patterns, your resistance points, and the kind of support that actually helps you move forward. Because you're not meant to force yourself into a process that works against you. You're meant to understand how your mind works, how your creativity responds, and how to build a writing rhythm that feels clear and practical and aligned with who you are. So if you'd love that deeper personalized insight, you can book a writing personality blueprint session at madisonmichaels.com/blueprint. So my friends, as you move back into your writing this week, I want you to pay attention to the words around the writing, the words before the page, the words during that messy middle of your writing session, and the words after you close the document. Because all of those words are shaping your identity, they're shaping your state, your relationship with your book, and your sense of what is possible. And you have so much more power here than you might realize. You can choose words that pressure you or words that support you. Words that close the door or words that open the next doorway. Words that reinforce your old patterns or words that help you become the writer you want to be, the writer who finishes. And remember, you are the vessel for your story. So let the words flow through you and onto the page. Until next time, my friends, take care and let's write the done book together. My friend, I hope today's episode gave you exactly what you needed for your writing journey. And if it did, would you take 30 seconds to share it with another writer who's struggling to start or finish their book? And if you're loving the show, I'd be so grateful if you left a quick review. It means the world to me and truly makes my day to know that this podcast is helping you. And as you head back into your week, I hope you feel more supported and connected to your creativity. And remember, you're a vessel for the story. So let the words flow through you and onto the page. Alright, I'm off to refill my cup of liquid gold and go and do a little writing of my own. Take care, and I'll meet you back here in the next episode of Write the Darn Book.